Excelsior Music Publishing is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast. The new concert band and jazz ensemble music releases from Excelsior Music Publishing are here now and available from wherever you get your band music, featuring works of all levels from an incredible composer roster. Listen, browse, and get inspired at excelsiormusic.com. That's EXCELCIA music.com. Tuner Caddy is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast. The Tuner Caddy was created by Mark Casperson, a band director with over 38 years of experience. Like most of us, he was tired of dropped tuners, wasted time, and students fumbling with their gear. So he did what any passionate teacher would do. He invented a solution. Mark designed the original Tuner Caddy after testing 57 different versions. The classic model fits right onto most music stands, holds any tuner, and even has a pencil holder. Then he added the Student Pro, a slimmer, binder-friendly with magnets, so it sticks right to the wire stands. And now there's even the TCT60M, a full tuner and metronome combo that's transposable and includes a 6-foot mic, super practical and more affordable than most other options out there. The best part is that these tools don't just help kids stay organized, they actually improve how we teach intonation and tone. Tuner Caddy is being used by some of the top programs in the country, from Texas to Virginia, and it's even been on stage at the Midwest Clinic and Music for All Festival. You can find Tuner Caddy at tunercaddy.com, at local retailers, or through Music and Arts, Sweetwater, and Premier Music Teaching Aids. They even offer support for educators writing grants. Check them out at tunercaddy.com. Do you spend valuable time all year correcting students' hand position instead of focusing on the music? Thumb Gummy solves this. These simple, cost-effective teaching aids fit on trumpets and trombones to guide the right hand into proper position, reducing tension, improving form, and giving tactile feedback so students can focus on playing, not adjusting. It's easy to use, comfortable, and designed by teachers and players, not just for your beginners, but for older students as well. Join thousands of students and bands already seeing the difference. And keep an eye out for our new clarinet thumb rest coming soon. Visit thumbgummy.com to learn more. That's thumbgummy.com. If you could take a moment and go to thegrowingbanddirector.com to give at least $5 or $3 a month, and it helps the content continue to be created for you to help our profession grow. Let's go back to our scheduled episode. Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 282. I'm here with composer Rich DeRosa. Rich, how are you?
Good.
Thanks for being here. If people have not listened to episode number 281, Jazz Education in Schools, we had a session there as well. You'll definitely want to go back and check that out. But if you are joining us for this one, we're going to be kind of delving into some repertoire, a repertoire discussion for jazz pedagogy within the school setting, and then listening to I think 6 of Rich's charts as well. If you don't know Rich's name, you're gonna learn about him today. So some general knowledge, Rich, that you have that you can share, some advice for band directors when they're choosing repertoire for their jazz program.
Yeah, well, I'll start with my own personal method. When every once in a while, I teach full time at UNT, and I do run a band there. And of course, I've directed professional bands, but every once in a while, I'll do, like an all state or all county, all regional, whatever it is, where, everybody in your audience knows what the scenario is. The guest conductor comes in for maybe 3 days and has X amount of hours for rehearsal and then puts on a concert. So, sometimes like the director of who the sponsor, I should say, who's also an educator, maybe say, "Hey, we got a great band," or I'll ask, "What's your band like?" And very often it's like, "Oh, we have a great band," or "Oh, they're pretty good except for," and then which sections are weak or whatever, which that's really helpful to know. But even when somebody says, "We have a really great band this year," I still take that, to mean only a certain thing, because that's a relative term. These students are 16 years old. Some of them might be great. I was just adjudicating the Essentially Ellington Festival at Jazz at Lincoln Center. And, they invited 30 bands, and they're extraordinary. And my job, along with Winton and the other judges, was to choose out of the 10. There were like 30 originally. Then the first 2 days, they had to whittle it down to 10, and then a new set of judges, which included myself. We had to listen to 10 bands and then choose 3 to
That's
perform.
really hard because all these
Oh my
bands are
God.
killing, right? I mean,
Well, I mean, you're talking, and so those are great bands, but how many is that typical? So anyway, the thing is, my point is that a lot of times I would rather err on the side of the chart being a little simpler rather than too hard. Because first of all, just from the practicality of the situation, imagine you're going into a situation you don't know the who the students are. You only have X amount of rehearsals, and there's other things like that you can't even plan for. One of them that I did, get there and it's like the Friday night. The kids are exhausted, right? They've been in school all day and getting ready, and like we're supposed to start rehearsing at 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock or whatever. And the guy comes up to me, and says, "Yeah, such and such, the bus broke down."
yep.
So now you got, it could be like your entire trumpet section, okay? Or it's like pepper throughout the band. Yeah, we're missing our lead trumpet, our third trombone, our lead tenor sax, and our bassist. So what are you going to do? So that's from the practical standpoint. From the artistic standpoint, and I do this with the UNT students too, I'll choose music that is, I don't want to say easier, but I'll say manageable, okay? That looks easy on the page, or it's like there's nothing complex about it. There's not a lot of odd meter, there's not a lot of complex rhythms, the chord progression is fairly simple or whatever. And what that enables me to do is to get the students playing right away, because then first of all, they feel confident they can handle the chart. And it's almost kind of like, yeah, we got this. And then that's when we can come in and say, yes, you do. That part of it you do. So the analogy a lot of times I'll share with them is that the written page is really just like a recipe. It's a script, And so just because you can read the script doesn't mean you're making art. Where is the art in the music? It's the written art is what the composer did. The performer has to take those notes and make them come off the page. And when you think about what that written music can do and what it can't do, it can tell us what pitches to play in certain locations rhythmically. We could say legato, staccato. We can share articulations. But what is not available or impossible to glean from the written page? Tone, mood, expression. So nuance. And then there's the idea of balance, right? Balance among the sections, phrasing together, and then the arc of a story. That the loud at letter C shouldn't be as loud as the loud at letter N. Or like where is the ultimate climax point?
And when you program simple enough, it also allows you to strive for mastery. Like try
Right.
to sound like the recording. Even on that basic level. Like don't just have it in your folder and try to get through it. Like, can you sound like the pro band that recorded this?
And that's exactly what I did, like with my 3 o'clock band. At the end, we've done a concert or whatever, and it's like there's a couple of days left. So I brought in one of my, charts that they grade 3 or whatever it was. And I said, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do today. We're going to sight read this. And I'm going to put you in this scenario of being a professional. Let's suppose a publishing company has hired you to come in for the day and record all these charts. Said they're not rehearsing them. They're just sight reading them. So let's take a look. Open up your page, look on your part. What do you notice? and then that's where I want to see them. Well, there's a such and such, whatever, and we discuss everything. What are some of the things that, given the style, what are we, what's the rhythmic subdivision? What's the, whatever it is, there's all these aspects before we play a note.
Yeah.
So I want you to be able to look at the part now, given the experience that you have, which you can't necessarily do with public school kids, or certainly as readily. But these, at UNT, a school like that, these people are, planning on going into the profession. So this is a moment, and so to put that pressure on them, and to do it with easier music, and the things like, man, so we're going for a take here.
Yeah.
So I can't have trumpets. I can't have you splitting notes. There's a key change at letter G. I can't be hearing wrong notes. You're going into the key of A flat. Get ready for it. Rhythmic, whatever, So all, you got to balance. You guys know, play up to the lead part, whatever. Don't overblow. Whatever it is. It's like, and we're going to do this hopefully on take 1, maybe take 2, and hopefully no more than take 3. And it's a great way to cultivate all the other aspects so taking simpler pieces of music. One of my favorites is Little Darling. It's classic literature, and you can do a lot with it and teach a lot of things. And when you look at the page, it looks simple.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Let's do that as a segue into the first piece we're going to listen to of yours, which is kind of a take Lil Darlin-ish. This is your chart on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Can you tell us a little bit about the chart if somebody's thinking about programming it? Then we'll listen to it here in a second.
Yeah, well, if you know Lil Darlin, it's like da 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 do dee. Hard tempo.
Yeah.
Right? And when Alfred Music, when they asked me to do an arrangement of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, for some reason I just heard, it's like, man, it would be nice to do it like a Little Darling thing.
Yeah.
Bob, bo da 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 da.
And the key to teaching that is going to be the triplet, like hearing the triplet underneath so
Yes.
they don't rush.
And that's one of my go-to. That's why I like teaching that chart, because first of all, you have the upbeat, ba,
which is on the third
quarter,
triplet.
Down,
Yeah.
down, 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 up. So you've got 3 rhythms that are, all over the place in any type of swing music. So what I want them to do, and I'll have them say, look, say this with me. Doodle da doodle da doodle da doodle da doodle da. And every beat has to have that going through it. You can feel how the beat has some nice width to it, and it's legato. I'm not going 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet. No, it's not the right feel. Doodle da 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 doodle da. Right? So it's the same thing. Doodle da 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 doodle doodle da doodle da doodle da doodle da. Right? When they say the kids are rushing, hey, don't rush. What that means is not the. You listen to the basic band; they're right on the beat. So here's the 8th note, but what's happening is when we put it in the triplet domain, that 8th note gets pushed back. So when somebody says lay back, what they really should be saying is put this upbeat further back. So dot 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 dee dot dee. See what I mean? It's placed further back in time.
Yeah, and when people say don't rush, you're describing the problem instead of providing the solution. So provide the solution by lay. Yeah.
Yeah, and that to me is the other thing, is like this psychological. This messes with kids' heads, especially drummers and bassists and whatever. It's like, rush. Now lay back on this one. And to me, it's like both of those things, they're too vague. So if we say, look, what I want you to do with each one of these beats, I want you to put a triplet in it. One triplet, 2 triplet, that's the academic way. Say, but this is jazz, so I want you to make it flowing. So I want you to use these syllables. Doodle da doodle da doodle da doodle da. Rhythm section, let me just hear you say it. I want you to snap on 2 and 4, and I want all 4 of you to go. doodle da doodle da doodle da doodle da doodle da, and I want to hear precision playing it together. All right, now go to your respective instruments.
And it locks it right in.
You know what I mean? And now they have something to think about.
Yeah.
It's not about rushing. It's not about dragging. It's about bust, make every beat flow with a triplet. And there you go.
Yeah.
And that's what the horn players, everybody does it.
If they lay that down, then the horns have a shot to swing with them. So
exactly.
All right, let's listen to it. Here's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. The next chart we're going to listen to is, as I told you earlier off air, on my Mount Rushmore of charts in the grade 2 range. I think Jumping Up the Woodside teaches not only a standard great tune that everybody needs to know, you're teaching history through it. You can talk about the great players that played on the original recordings. The improvised solos, you can be improvised, but you've written out some great language for the students to learn as written solos. Which I know we want to talk about. I do want to mention in my thought, just the chart that has like an optional ending. You can like end it and then you can go one little further. So in our area, this is like a young high school, more of a middle school chart. You really have to have a rhythm section they don't have to be burning, but they have to be able to play. So if you have a really weak drummer or weak bass player or a weak piano player, this is probably not the chart. But if you have that going, then very attainable. I love the plunger stuff. I think that's great teaching too. So tell us from your vantage point about the chart.
Yeah. Well, it's a classic Count Basie chart, which I think for any band director, not dealing with Basie and understanding that is kind of like maybe an English teacher not dealing with Shakespeare at a certain level or whatever, So it's fundamental. And it's also a great way to teach the roles of the rhythm section, because in the Count Basie band, each rhythm player has a very defined role, and which we could discuss if time allows. But other than that, that's a really important aspect to teaching the fundamental swing tradition within the jazz ensemble. As far as the chart itself, these arrangers that are hired by these publishing companies are asked to write out solos, meaning create what a professional improviser might do. And so that was an interesting assignment for me for this chart, because it's a more up-tempo kind of a piece. And of course, you got to feature Basie, right? So there's I need a piano solo, and then I had a solo for saxophone, trumpet, and trombone. And I can't remember if that's the order, but I remember those.
And aren't each and that's not a full chorus. Instead of 32 bars, isn't it? Is it like 16 bars for each of the solo,
It
something
it
like
might
that.
be. I can't even remember. It might
Which
have
is
been that.
brilliant because 32 bars at the grade 2
Right.
level is too long.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're probably right. I probably split it up. And back in the day, a lot of those professional charts, the guys didn't play that long anyway.
Yep.
Why? Because they were on, the records couldn't handle that much time. So a lot of those charts are 3 minutes.
I'll also say if there's like a trumpet solo, a trombone solo, a tenor solo, an alto solo, but you don't have a trombone soloist, like you can make like write that out for another instrument, right? You just need horn players to play. It doesn't matter if it's exact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so anyway, the strategy for me as an improviser, composing an improvisation, it was like, well, the piano, it should sound something like what Basie would be. So up here in the fifth octave, whatever, that's kind of needs to be there. And playing, and of course, writing in the style is paramount. But then really thinking about the technical ability. So the easiest instrument technically of the horns is the saxophone. The hardest one is the trombone. Why? Because of the mechanics of the instrument. You've got the slide, first of all, which is difficult to tune, right? We're 7 positions, but where are they? Except for the first position, it's closed, but it's a feel thing. But then the trombonist has to legato tongue a lot of times to get the note not to, sound like a kazoo. So it's just a much more cumbersome technical experience. So the idea, if you look at those solos, the trombone solo is less complex. It's designed to be more simple and not a lot of moving around. Ba bo ba, ba bo ba bo ba ba ba. Maybe something like that. Slower moving things and the syncopation of the slower ideas. Even one note. Ba 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 da ba bo ba da ba. You can do a lot with a couple of notes, and the little kid doesn't have to worry about navigation.
And band directors around the world, thank you for that.
Well, that's my job.
Yep.
It's like the publishing company, and this is where, we're thinking like educators. Yes, obviously I'm an arranger, I'm a composer, I'm thinking that way, but that's subordinate to education. I'm an educator, so I have to guide the arranging process with the idea of teaching is first, and to try to understand what the students can do.
To highlight that education before we listen to it. And if you're listening and your band is a grade 2 band, 3 band, 4 band, or even a 5 band, I think this chart needs to be played by your kids at some point. There's so much to it, even if it's for a younger band level. There's so much to it. So looking forward to this. Let's check out Jumping at the Woodside. my wife teaches middle school band, so she has the kids who first start in jazz band. So this red cover series or anything that's simple enough, we're always looking for very simple standard tunes that are playable. And your chart on Mac the Knife is one of them. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, thank you, Kyle. You know what? When we arrangers write these things and we just send them back to the publisher, and it kind of like we forget about them,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and we never really know, other than maybe a royalty check comes in and it's like, oh, they sold a fair amount of these. But we never really know personally until somebody like yourself, talking about this idea, and every once in a while, somebody will mention that, boy, that chart you did on whatever. It's like, well, I really appreciate, I'm sure any of the arrangers out there who do this kind of thing, always love to hear that, because we just, we try to do the best we can, but we're never really sure of the impact the chart has.
There's a teaching tool that you have embedded in this, and that's the halftime feel and the 4/4 feel, because that's a whole teaching thing as itself, right? The halftime and the 4 is going to rush and drag and all this. Right. So I think you have the first 2 phrases or so are halftime, and then it goes to the saxophones, I think, and it goes to 4/4. So that's right. That's a whole thing.
So did I write 16ths in the saxes or something like that?
I don't think so. I don't think they would have let you do that.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't remember exactly what I did in that chart, but anytime you have shifts in, well, certainly field changes, like jazz going to swing eighths, going to even eighths, or going to double time back to halftime, or 3/4 to 4/4. Anytime there are shifts like that, it's a precarious moment, because the things can get undone, or the tempo can change, and things like that.
Yeah. So. All right, let's check it out. Here's your arrangement of Mac the Knife. Okay, so the next chart we're going to listen to is a grade 4 that you did on Yankee Doodle, and you said you had to approach it in a certain way because the tune is in itself is so short.
Figured, well, Yankee Doodle, that was the popular American tune from the American Revolution, fife and drum type thing, and it's a march, right? So, as we know, back in those days, you have to have the reason for the march was to keep the troops moving forward, So anyway, I said, well, let me maybe in some way try to kind of tap into history. So I created this introduction, which would also help me fill up the performance time, and started with just the drum, and of course I have no control over the who recorded it, how it was recorded, whatever. But ideally, and I think the drummer did a good job with it. It was much like, very military. But if I could have my choice, I would have wanted one of those old field snares, the
Yeah.
big deep, you know, something that says like, wow, this is like you're not your typical jazz band snare drum to help put us in this time zone. And then I created this little drone, like these open perfect fifths, which it's staunch, it's grounded, but it's also hollow. It's somewhat empty. You know, this is the characteristic of a perfect fifth standing alone. It just conveys that. And then I started to take little elements. You know, just like different little things. Try to make it sound military, but also to say this is a look back in history.
On this recording, we'll play a couple different snippets of it because it's what, a 7-minute chart or so. So we're not just going to play the first minute. We'll kind of play some of what you're talking about, and then we'll find some more to listen to as well.
And then if like I can't spend the whole chart there, I got to get to the modern day. So have the drum player build, and then there's this big chord that kind of like it's like moves us into the modern time period. And now I decided to do a Latin kind of bump, so now it's all kind of Latinized and modernized, Americanized. That's another take if you think about it. It's American history. Right, so now we're in modern day. And then I don't do the B section until way later. There's like solos, and it's all just done on the A section, and I reharmonized it and stuff. And then the B section, da 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 do dee dee dee, right? I go into full blown classic big band shout, and then finish it out in going back to the Latin thing. And that's how very often arrangements are put together. There's a storyline.
Yeah.
There's it's not just using my musical brain. Oh, I put these notes and this voicing and blah blah. It's like, especially for something like Yankee Doodle. So I hope when people hear the recording, they'll hear all these things, but at least they'll now have a sense of what was going on in my head.
Awesome. Let's check it out. Here's Yankee Doodle. Well, Rich, thanks for being here. Appreciate your time so much. We do have
Sure.
two more tunes left. One is a favorite of yours. Sorry, a favorite of mine of yours that I've bought for my school for next year as well. And there was a surprise in there, so I'm so excited that I saw it when I got the score. We get to talk about this on air too. A walk-in thing, great Benny Carter tune. There is the Bob Kurnow chart out there, and I know there's probably some other charts on it too. But yours, you did for the WDR Big Band.
Yep.
And I think Warren Vacher was the soloist for that. If people
Yep.
haven't seen it, like, so the recording we're going to play is actually the audio from that. Hopefully, they're okay with us using that. And this chart is available through you on your website for anybody who wants it. I love it because it's a great, simple tune. I mean, Benny Carter. I just feel like you can never lose with Benny Carter. And
No.
there's this flute
Right.
solo, which I think we'll talk about. But what I didn't realize, like, I planned, okay, there's a solo, there's like a saxophone player, and then everybody else is on flute, right? I didn't really realize it when I watched the video that they were two alto flutes. So
Yes.
I bought the chart already, so I'm scrambling and I'm sitting there going, do they need to be alto flutes? And of course, yes, they need to be alto flutes. So I'm scrambling in my local area who has alto flutes that we can borrow, and luckily we've secured a couple. So
Well, here's the other thing. I think I had to convert those alto flutes to clarinets at
really,
some point. I think so. If you need those, let me know. But that's another option. But when you're in a professional situation and they have the instruments,
yeah,
when they're available to you. But there's the sound of a flute soli, which is just so great and quintessential to that period of
and
Hollywood jazz.
the education for your saxophone players to, like, you're
Oh,
playing some flute. Now, I wouldn't do it if I didn't already have a couple legit flute players with a couple doublers, but I know I've talked to a lot of professional woodwind players who are educators, and they say, yeah, like, I have to make my kids double because if they want to get gigs, they got
hmm
to know some clarinet, they got to know some
yeah.
flute.
Well, here's another thing before we get into the chart. Just and maybe the band directors are doing this already, but for those who maybe haven't thought about it, if you have a piece of music that seems to be really working well for the band, but you have some doubles, whether it's flute, clarinet, bassoon, who knows, to me, there's nothing wrong with bringing a student who's maybe that's their major. They're maybe not even a jazz player, You bringing in somebody from your concert band or orchestra to join the jazz band. And it's a great way. I mean, we have these things, we call them studio orchestras, for lack of a better term. They're like jazz symphonic, orchestral jazz, whatever. It's a great opportunity for those students to put them in a different environment. It makes the band sound better. And maybe in some ways it encourages the saxes, like, wow, I love the way so-and-so, my friend plays the flute. It sounds so beautiful. That encourages the saxophone player maybe to do those instruments.
Yeah.
So
And I love your use on this chart of the colors of the brass section, the bucket mutes.
oh
You change the rhythm of the bridge, like, just a little bit. And it took me a
yes,
couple times hearing it, like, wait a minute, that's okay, what is that rhythm actually?
yes,
And
it's
now,
quarter note triplets in the middle.
yeah,
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 that's like a Jerry Mulligan thing.
mhm.
And Jerry Mulligan and Gil Evans and all of those writers in that cool period loved to use quarter note triplets to stretch the phrasing. So, for example, if I sing the bridge, the way it's written, typically 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and do do do. Here's just jazz eighths, boo ba doo da da. So what I did is boo ba doo doo da dee ya doo doo dee, and so that was big thing with those guys back then, to use those quarter note triplets to stretch
Yeah, this is a chart
chords.
that just explores colors in so many different ways, and the duet between the trumpet and you have it written in
Well,
Barry sax as the lower
yeah,
harmony part.
there's a lot of history that I put into this in a tip of the hat, so to speak. The one you just mentioned with the trumpet and the baritone sax, the famous Mulligan pianoless quartet. So in the chart too, that's why there's no piano playing. It's
And I have a
supposed to
younger
just
piano player, so that works brilliant in my
yeah,
band.
happy accident.
Yep.
And then and of course Benny Carter also had a career in Hollywood. So I decided, I mean, he's not as well known for that, but certainly Henry Mancini in that era is, he and Johnny Mandel were probably the two biggest, but the sound of the low flutes in unison and then eventually in harmony if you use them in a kind of a soli type thing. So that was my and also to keep the chart, it's a cool sounding chart.
Yeah.
Right? It's a cool vibe. So there's the Mulligan Pianist Quartet, there's the Hollywood flute section sound, and then we have on the in the middle of the chart, there's that like what Benny Golson's Blues March, bump, dump, 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 the rhythm to that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like and it's a classic kind of like what it's Blues March where it's just all staccato downbeats, bump, dump, dump.
And is that the Fender Rhodes solo?
Or
the organ?
Oh yes, it was on that organ. It's on the organ. Right. Thank you. Yes, it's during the organ solo. So there's like that tip of the, nod acknowledgement to Benny Golson. And then the organ solo was because this organist, Shirley Scott, recorded Benny's tune on her last
I didn't
record.
know that recording, but you mentioned it in the pre-show notes, so I checked it out. That's a great recording.
Yeah. And so, it's just here again, it's another take that arrangers sometimes do. It's kind of like, well, it's not just about compiling, melodies, new harmonies, voicings, counterlines. If you can find an interesting story and tap into history. So in this case, it wasn't American history in the sense of military, but like with Yankee Doodle, but it was the jazz history.
I love it. And I know the solos are written, in the recording, the solos in trumpet, Barry sax and piano, organ. But, used the way you want it. And you could even say you only have two soloists.
Yeah.
Right? You could cut a chorus. Just make sure you cut full choruses. Don't cut up the chart, right?
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing that band directors can be aware of. We understand as arrangers that sometimes, this is not like symphonic material. It can be, there can be some strategic surgical alterations, and that's to make the music ultimately better, whether it's for different players or like that. Oh, the jazz happens to be assigned on a certain chair, but I need to move it off of this chair because I don't have the student to do that. And, there's a lot of ways.
Or maybe that kid's got three other solos and you want to give it to another kid for some other reason.
Yeah. So even like with the thing with like, oh man, I've got two alto flutes, I can't do this chart. Well, if it's transposed for clarinets, then yes, you can do it. It's not going to be the same sound as the flute soli. That's really special.
And if people don't know how to surgically manipulate a chart like that, I'm sure there's great jazz teachers in your area. Reach out to somebody and I'm sure they can help you. All right, let's listen to at least part of it. Here's A Walking Thing. All right, Rich, we're on our last chart. Thanks for doing these 2 episodes. Appreciate your time very much. This last chart we're going to listen to is one of yours. What's the grade level on this? It's called Perseverance.
Oh man, it's not even published, but it's anything that I write for the 1 o'clock band is, I would say, probably at least a grade 5, if not 6. The creative process is pretty fascinating, and there's not one way to do it. But this is, a very artsy composition. Arranging is different. One is not better than the other. I think the thing with arranging can show one's sense of imagination because, like when you listen to my arrangements of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and Yankee Doodle, especially, you can hear how imagination can bring these very simple little songs into something that one could be like, wow, I never heard that before. So that to me is the fun of arranging. Composition, of course, is a blank slate. And so, for the composer, it's tougher because there's no pre-existing material. And you have to figure out how to make a cohesive statement musically. But it's also a blank slate for the audience, too, because they have nothing to compare to. So I mentioned earlier this idea of absolute music and programmatic music, or the mechanics of music, or what I call the grammar of music, meaning music theory, right, is essentially grammar. We're going to learn about chords, scales, phrases, harmonic function, whatever. All of that goes into grammar. And so, there were plenty of grammar teachers, aren't there? Teach the English language. That doesn't mean they're novelists. So the novelist is the one who knows how to take grammar and tell a story. And that to me is really ultimately what composers, I believe, strive to do.
Yeah.
And so therefore, the absolute element is an essential component. It's crucial to the process. But without the programmatic aspect, in some fashion, it doesn't have to be 50-50, but proportionally there should be some element of the emotional aspect, because that's what people are going to identify with. And there's also the passage of time that we need to consider, that composers should consider, like movies. It's not like painting. When you look at a painting, the person who looks at it at a museum or wherever, it's elective, the time process. That person can glance at it for 10 seconds, look at it for a minute, or spend an hour looking at it. With music, like film, we have to have we have to engage their listening process and make the time, make it interesting. And that's what stories do too, right? So Perseverance is, I didn't have the title right away. I just had this idea. I was sitting at my piano and I just went, right? And then I got this eye, and when these, and like once in a while, you just sit down. I mean, there's no one way that composition can be generated, but sometimes it happens from the piano. Sometimes it happens from singing. It could happen from hearing a rhythm. It could happen from listening to other pieces of music, walking in the woods. There's not one way to do this, but this particular composition, I was just happened to be fiddling at the piano, and I don't know why I just started playing that. But when there's like this could be something.
Yeah.
And so Then then there's a kind of a tense moment of kind of like, oh my God, I hope I don't forget this. I got to make sure, and
Write it
try to
down quick.
retain.
Yeah.
Woo! Because you can forget it. And then once I had the idea, okay, so and I like a lot of times I like to come up with titles soon or come up with a storyline soon because then I can generate music through the storyline. And so there's this idea just and if you look at the score, the pianist doesn't play these exact notes but plays this constant, that in other words, it's just a series of quarter notes with these little voicings. And that to me represents the aspect of perseverance, this idea of keep going, passage of time, work through time.
And the piece is through composed, right?
It's all through composed.
Yep.
So even with
Beautiful.
just the idea of this melody, like even just that moving, like moving down, and then having to like pick yourself up. And then there's a sense of that's a drop, and then you can feel the sense of tension, like reaching, and it's an effort's being made, and then it relaxes. So that could be like trying to get something and then not quite succeeding, and then trying.
I love that.
And so it all expands out from there.
What
And
a
so,
what a great message. I appreciate that so much.
yeah, well, that's and so I'm speaking to two different types of people in the audience. One type includes all of us. We're human beings, and perseverance happens in everybody's life. And then there's a segment of the vast audience that are musicians.
Yep.
And that perseverance is such an important quality because if the first time the teacher tells us we're not doing it right, or we are practicing and it's coming slowly, or sometimes we're better and then we're not as good and then we get better, and to have the courage and the tenacity to keep moving forward and trust in the this inner spirit that makes us want to do what we do with music. To me, it's a fascinating quality.
I love
So
that.
that's what this piece is all about. And as you listen, so there's no song form because I didn't want it to have that either. It was because we don't live. Time is not like that. I mean, we try to mark it off with calendars and weeks and all of that, but if you didn't have all of those modern things, it's just like, or that's maybe the
Time.
sunrise,
Yeah.
but you lose track of, so it's formless in a way.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.